I remember the first time I truly felt invisible in my own home. I had spent decades raising my children, guiding them, sacrificing my own comfort so they could have the lives I had dreamed for them. And yet, somewhere along the way, I realized that love and effort didn't always guarantee respect. My husband had passed years ago, leaving behind not just memories, but a fortune most people could only dream of. Yet, to my eldest son, that wealth seemed like a weapon, a tool to measure my worth, or rather, to dismiss it. I lived in a quiet neighborhood, one where everyone knew everyone else's business. I had kept to myself, visiting my small garden daily, feeding the birds, knitting in my worn armchair, and whispering to myself stories of the past. My children rarely visited. They had lives, busy, complicated, and far from the simple rhythm of my days. But I told myself that was fine. As long as I knew they were happy, that was enough. That illusion of happiness shattered one crisp autumn morning. I had gone to the kitchen to make tea when my eldest son, David, barged in, his face tight with anger I couldn't yet understand. "Mom," he said, trying to sound casual, but failing miserably. "We need to talk about Dad's money." I froze, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. I had always feared this day, the day when discussions of inheritance would overshadow all the years of love and care I had given. David leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Look, don't expect a dime," he said bluntly. "Dad made it clear in his notes, nothing for you. All of it goes to me and the others." The word struck me like a knife. I blinked, hoping I had misheard. "David, what are you talking about? Your father never said anything like that."
He scoffed.
"Mom, you think you know him? You think you know anything? He was smart enough to leave me everything. You're just a nuisance to the family fortune." I felt my heart tighten, a slow ache that spread through my chest. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to stand straight. "David, don't speak to me that way. I raised you, didn't I? I worked my hands to the bone, so you could have what you have today. And now you tell me I'm a nuisance." He shrugged, as if my words were meaningless. "I'm just being realistic, Mom. Don't expect anything. Just don't get in the way." I remember staring at him, stunned. This wasn't the boy who had once held my hand on his first day of school. This wasn't the child who had clung to me during storms or cried when I left for the hospital after minor surgery. He had grown into a man I barely recognized. A man consumed by greed. For days after that conversation, I couldn't eat properly. I wandered the house in a daze, listening to the creak of the floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator as if it were some kind of companion. Memories flooded back. Memories of my husband, David's laughter as a child, the warmth of family dinners. And I realized that I had to make a choice, to succumb to despair or to rise above it, even if the world told me I was nothing. I began documenting everything: letters from my husband, photographs, old receipts, diaries. I needed to remind myself of the life we had built, and more importantly, the love that had been real. The money was a symbol, yes, but it was also proof of a legacy that I had contributed to in ways that David clearly failed to understand. Weeks later, I received a letter from our family lawyer, Mr. Harris. His handwriting was precise, and his tone polite, but I could sense the weight of importance in every word. The will reading was scheduled. Everyone would be there: David, my other children, and a few close friends. It was set for a Thursday morning in the grand office downtown. I felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. Part of me wanted to retreat, to hide away and avoid the humiliation of confrontation. But another part, a quieter, fiercer part, whispered, "This is your moment. Stand tall. Your voice matters." That Thursday, I dressed carefully. I wore my favorite blue dress, the one that my husband always said made my eyes shine. My hair was neatly pinned back, and I carried my knitting bag as though it were armor. Every step toward the downtown office was a step toward reclaiming myself, toward facing the son who had dismissed me so coldly. When I arrived, the room was already buzzing with people. My children were there, of course, and I could feel David's gaze piercing through the crowd, searching for weakness. He was dressed impeccably, the picture of confidence, the picture of entitlement. I held my head high, reminding myself that appearances could be deceiving. Strength was often silent, and patience was a weapon far sharper than anger. Mr. Harris greeted everyone politely, his calm demeanor contrasting with the tension in the room. "We are here to read the last will and testament of your father," he said, his voice steady. "Before we begin, I must remind everyone that this is a legal document, binding and final." I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap. I watched my children, trying to read their expressions. David was smug, his lips curled in what he probably thought was a confident smile. My other children fidgeted nervously, glancing between him and me. As Mr. Harris began reading, the room fell into silence. Every word seemed amplified, echoing off the high ceilings. He spoke of properties, stocks, and investments, each announcement punctuated by murmurs of surprise or disinterest. But I waited for my name. My heart pounded in my chest with each passing moment. I thought back to the nights I had spent awake, worrying about their future, praying that they would grow up kind and compassionate. I remembered my husband's quiet wisdom, the way he had always said, "Money is never the measure of a person, love is." David shifted in his seat, clearly growing impatient. He leaned toward his wife and whispered something, probably a reminder of the wealth that he believed would soon be his alone. I did not flinch. I did not respond. I simply listened, letting the past, the memories, and the quiet strength I had accumulated over the years carry me forward. I thought about the friends who had abandoned me when the years made me less interesting, the neighbors who had whispered behind closed doors, and the family who had assumed I would quietly fade away. And I smiled to myself. Let them wait. Let them wonder. They had no idea that sometimes the smallest presence in the room could have the greatest impact. Even as Mr. Harris spoke of stocks and properties, my mind wandered to my husband's favorite fishing spot, the small cabin we had once shared, the laughter of my grandchildren as they ran through the garden. Those memories were priceless, treasures that no money could replace. And yet, I could not deny the thrill of knowing that justice, in some form, was about to be served. David's eyes flicked toward me several times, searching for fear, for hesitation, for any sign that his words had wounded me. He would find none. I was calm. I was composed. I was ready. The clock ticked on, each second stretching longer than the last. I could hear the faint sound of my own breathing, steady and determined. This was my life, my story, and I would not let anyone, not even my own children, rewrite it. As the will reading progressed, Mr. Harris's voice carried the weight of finality. The next item in the will pertains to the distribution of assets among the children. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a mixture of anticipation and fear. This was the moment that David had been waiting for, the moment he believed would confirm his dominance, his entitlement. And yet, I held on to a quiet hope, a glimmer of faith that the years of love and patience had not been in vain. I remembered a conversation I had with my husband shortly before he passed. He had taken my hands in his, worn and trembling, and whispered, "They may not understand now, but one day, they will see the truth. Stand firm, my love. Stand firm." Those words were my shield. They were the voice of reason and courage in a room full of tension. I straightened my back, took a deep breath, and prepared for whatever came next. The door creaked slightly as someone entered the room, drawing a few glances. I focused back on Mr. Harris, who paused for a moment, consulting his notes. The tension was almost unbearable. Every eye in the room seemed fixed on the next words, every heart seemingly synchronized in anxious anticipation. And then the moment approached. I could feel it in the air, the subtle shift of energy as the lawyer cleared his throat and prepared to announce the next section. My fingers tightened around my knitting bag, a small comfort amidst the storm of emotions. I glanced at David one last time, noting the arrogance in his posture, the confidence in his gaze. He had no idea what was coming, no idea how quickly the tide could turn. I closed my eyes for a brief second, whispering a silent prayer. Let justice, in whatever form it may take, be revealed today. And with that, the moment had arrived. My heart thumped like a drum in my chest as Mr. Harris cleared his throat and held the thick envelope that contained my husband's final words, his last wishes. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of papers and the occasional cough. Everyone's eyes were on him, waiting. David's smug grin had not faded. In fact, he leaned forward, ready to claim what he thought was already his. I took a deep breath, my fingers clutching the edge of my chair. I reminded myself, strength is quiet. Patience is sharper than anger. I had lived decades in silence, enduring dismissals and disrespect. But now, the truth would be revealed. Mr. Harris began reading the will, item by item. Properties, investments, stocks, vacation homes. Each announcement caused murmurs in the room. David's smile broadened slightly every time a large figure was mentioned, clearly imagining it all in his hands. I stayed calm, my gaze fixed on him. Then, finally, Mr. Harris paused, looking down at his notes. He cleared his throat and said in a measured voice, "The next item concerns the primary beneficiary of the estate, the person whom your father most wanted to honor and provide for." The room fell into a heavier silence. David's confident posture faltered slightly, though he quickly masked it. He leaned toward his wife, whispering something, probably a reassurance that this was still his victory. But I had already learned not to underestimate the power of a quiet heart. Mr. Harris adjusted his glasses and continued. It is the wish of the deceased that a portion of his estate, including significant investments and properties, be allocated to his beloved wife, Margaret, also known as Mom in the family. A flicker of disbelief crossed David's face. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked around the room, as if searching for confirmation that the lawyer had misspoken. But no one was shaking their heads, no one corrected the statement. The room's tension thickened. I don't understand, David stammered, his voice strained. Mom, why, how? I stayed seated, my hands folded neatly in my lap. I felt no rush to respond. I had endured decades of arrogance, dismissiveness, and betrayal. Now was not the time for hasty words. Now was the time for truth to speak. Mr. Harris continued, unflinching. The deceased stated clearly that Margaret had sacrificed so much for the family, guiding and supporting his children, and she deserves acknowledgement. Accordingly, she will receive 50% of the total estate, including all major holdings, with the remaining 50% divided among the children. Gasps echoed across the room. David's face turned pale, the confident grin replaced by shock, fear, and confusion. He tried to regain composure, but it was too late. The years of entitlement, the years of dismissiveness had collided with reality. I could hear my younger children whispering among themselves, their eyes wide with amazement. My heart swelled, not with pride in the money itself, but with pride in the recognition that my life's work, my love, and my presence were finally acknowledged. David finally found his voice, though it was weak, trembling. But, Dad, he said. I shook my head slowly. David, I said, my voice calm but firm, your father never said you could dismiss me. He never said my sacrifices didn't matter. Perhaps you misunderstood. Or perhaps, in your greed, you refused to see the truth. He opened his mouth to argue further, but I raised a hand gently. Save it. Today is not about anger. Today is about recognition. Something I have earned not by inheritance, but by decades of love, patience, and care. The room was still. The tension hung like a storm cloud. And yet, I felt an unexpected calmness wash over me. I realized that for years I had measured my worth by the approval of others, especially my children. But now, in this moment, I understood something profound. My worth had never depended on their acknowledgement. My worth had been in my steadfast heart, in my kindness, in the life I had built. Mr. Harris proceeded to read smaller bequests, donations to charities, gifts to friends, instructions for properties. Each word reinforced a simple truth. Love, respect, and integrity matter more than money or entitlement. David slumped in his chair, his earlier confidence completely gone. He looked at me, searching for a reaction, perhaps hoping for anger or desperation. But I smiled faintly, a smile that held decades of wisdom and quiet strength. "My dear children," I said, my voice steady, "this estate, it is not just numbers on paper. It is a reflection of life lived, love given, and sacrifices made. Remember this. Wealth without respect is empty, and recognition without gratitude is hollow. Today is not just about inheritance. It is about understanding the value of family and the lessons that love and patience can teach." I could see tears glistening in my younger daughter's eyes. She whispered, "Mom, I'm so glad." I nodded softly. "Yes, my dear. Be glad. Be grateful. And let this be a lesson for all of us." David's face was now a mask of disbelief and frustration. He muttered under his breath, I can't believe this." I chose not to respond. Some lessons are best learned in silence, through reflection. And this, I hoped, would be one of those lessons for him. As Mr. Harris concluded the reading, he reminded everyone of the legal implications and distributed copies of the will. The room began to clear, but I lingered for a moment, letting the reality of the moment sink in. I felt a quiet triumph, not because of the money, but because finally, after years of being dismissed, I was seen. My contributions, my love, my patience, they mattered. And now they were acknowledged. Later, as we left the office, David avoided my gaze. My other children stayed close, offering hugs and quiet congratulations. I smiled at them, feeling a warmth that no fortune could ever match. Walking out into the crisp air, I realized that the journey to this moment had been long and often painful. There had been nights of doubt, days of invisibility, moments when I questioned whether love and patience were enough. And yet, here I was, standing tall, finally recognized. In the days that followed, life slowly returned to a new normal. The house felt warmer, my children more attentive, and I found myself smiling more often. I still tended my garden, still knit in my armchair, still whispered stories to myself. But now, there was a subtle shift. I carried a quiet pride, a knowledge that silence and patience can hold more power than anger and impatience. David eventually approached me, a mixture of shame and reluctance in his eyes. "Mom, I didn't understand." I looked at him, my gaze soft but unwavering. "David, understanding comes with reflection. Perhaps one day you'll see that life isn't just about wealth or possessions. It's about respect, love, and integrity. Today is a lesson, not a punishment." He nodded slowly, the first flicker of humility I had seen in years. I did not chastise him further. Life had a way of teaching lessons in its own time, and this had been one of the most important. As I returned home that evening, I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. I thought of my husband, of our life together, and of the enduring strength that love and patience had given me. I whispered a quiet thank you, not for the money, but for the acknowledgement, for the lesson, and for the knowledge that even when overlooked, even when dismissed, a quiet heart can prevail. And in that moment, I realized something beautiful. The years of silence, the years of endurance, the years of quiet love, they were never wasted. They had prepared me for this day. They had given me the strength to face disappointment and emerge with dignity. And most importantly, they had taught me that recognition, when it comes, is sweetest when it is earned through love, patience, and unwavering integrity. So, to all silent grandmas, all those who have been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated, speak your truth, live your love, and remember that your strength is unseen, yet powerful beyond measure. One day, the world, or at least your family, will see it. And when they do, it will change everything. I never thought that day would feel so long, yet so monumental. The echo of Mr. Harris's words still rang in my ears, reverberating through the room, as if time itself had paused just to honor the moment. David's shock was almost palpable. I could see it in the way he froze, his usually confident posture collapsing into something fragile, something human. For years, he had believed money could command respect, that wealth could erase a mother's worth. And now, in one simple reading, that illusion shattered. The tension was so thick that I could almost taste it, like copper in the back of my throat. Every breath felt heavy, deliberate. My hands rested calmly on my lap, yet inside, a storm of emotions raged: vindication, relief, and, most surprisingly, gratitude. For decades, I had waited quietly, enduring whispers, dismissals, and cold shoulders. And now, finally, justice had a name. Mine. David's face was pale, his mouth slightly open as if searching for words that would never come. He whispered something to his wife, likely trying to rationalize, but I didn't care to listen. His attempts to twist reality no longer mattered. Today was about truth, and truth had a voice that could not be silenced. "Mom," my younger daughter finally said, her voice soft and trembling, I never realized how much you sacrificed for all of us." I looked at her, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "My dear," I said gently, "you don't need to realize now. Life has its own lessons. Sometimes, it takes witnessing a moment like this to understand what patience and love really mean." The lawyer continued reading the finer details of the will. There were investments, properties, and cash allocations, but it was clear the most significant portion of the estate, the heart of it, had been rightfully entrusted to me. I could feel the weight of years of neglect and dismissal lift from my shoulders. It was not money that freed me, it was recognition, acknowledgement, validation. I never thought that day would feel so long, yet so monumental. The echo of Mr. Harris's words still rang in my ears, reverberating through the room, as if time itself had paused just to honor the moment. David's shock was almost palpable. I could see it in the way he froze, his usually confident posture collapsing into something fragile, something human. For years, he had believed money could command respect, that wealth could erase a mother's worth. And now, in one simple reading, that illusion shattered. The tension was so thick that I could almost taste it, like copper in the back of my throat. Every breath felt heavy, deliberate. My hands rested calmly on my lap, yet inside, a storm of emotions raged: vindication, relief, and, most surprisingly, gratitude. For decades, I had waited quietly, enduring whispers, dismissals, and cold shoulders. And now, finally, justice had a name. Mine. David's face was pale, his mouth slightly open as if searching for words that would never come. He whispered something to his wife, likely trying to rationalize, but I didn't care to listen. His attempts to twist reality no longer mattered. Today was about truth, and truth had a voice that could not be silenced. "Mom," my younger daughter finally said, her voice soft and trembling, I never realized how much you sacrificed for all of us." I looked at her, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "My dear," I said gently, "you don't need to realize now. Life has its own lessons. Sometimes, it takes witnessing a moment like this to understand what patience and love really mean." The lawyer continued reading the finer details of the will. There were investments, properties, and cash allocations, but it was clear the most significant portion of the estate, the heart of it, had been rightfully entrusted to me. I could feel the weight of years of neglect and dismissal lift from my shoulders. It was not money that freed me, it was recognition, acknowledgement, validation. David finally found his voice, though it trembled like a leaf in a storm. I don't understand," he said, each word shaky, faltering. "Dad," he said. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "David," I said, my tone calm yet firm, "your father may have said many things in life, but he never said you could dismiss me. And if he did, perhaps he was speaking to the version of you that needed correction. Today, you see the reality. Life, patience, and love are far stronger than greed and entitlement." He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. I could see his mind racing, grappling with a truth he had never been ready to face. The confidence he wore like armor had crumbled. He had underestimated the quiet strength of a mother who had endured, who had loved without condition, and who had never sought to dominate with anger or pride. The room had fallen silent, the only sounds being the turning of papers and the occasional cough. Every eye seemed drawn to me, whether consciously or not, as if sensing the weight of the moment. I felt a strange mixture of humility and empowerment. Humility for having endured so much in silence, and empowerment because my time had come. Mr. Harris concluded the reading, explaining the legal formalities and distributing copies of the will. People murmured quietly, some in admiration, others in disbelief. David slumped back into his chair, staring blankly ahead. He did not speak, he could not. The lesson had been delivered, and it had landed harder than any words could have. I rose slowly, feeling the subtle strength that comes from inner peace. I walked toward David, my steps deliberate but gentle. "David," I said softly, "this isn't about punishment. It isn't about resentment. It's about understanding. Life has a way of teaching us lessons, sometimes through silence, sometimes through experiences like this. Today, I hope you learn something invaluable. Love, respect, and integrity matter far more than money." He looked at me then, truly looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. I saw a flicker of remorse, of recognition, of the boy he once was before greed clouded his heart. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. I smiled gently, letting the moment hang. "Apologies are a start, David. Reflection is the real work. Learn from this. Grow from this. And perhaps one day, you'll understand that life isn't about what you claim from others, but what you give to the world." The room seemed lighter after that. My younger children approached me, their eyes full of love and gratitude. "Mom, we're so proud of you," my daughter said. I hugged them tightly, feeling warmth spread through me like sunlight on a winter morning. In the days that followed, the estate transitioned as dictated in the will. Advisors, lawyers, and accountants moved in and out of my life, but I remained grounded, holding on to the simple truths I had always cherished: kindness, patience, and unwavering love. Money, as powerful as it seemed, was never the real measure of happiness or strength. Recognition and respect, earned through life's trials, were far more precious. David struggled to adapt to the reality, but he slowly began to change. He approached me with humility, asking questions, listening to stories of the past he had never cared to hear. He began to understand, painfully but surely, that life was about more than entitlement. And in those moments, I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because forgiveness frees the one who gives it. I returned to my small routines, tending the garden, knitting in my chair, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Life had its rhythm again, but now it carried a deeper meaning. I realized that silence, patience, and endurance could wield more power than anger and confrontation ever could. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the skyline. I whispered a quiet thank you, not for the wealth, but for the acknowledgement, for the lesson, and for the journey that had led me here. My life, once filled with quiet struggles, had become a testament to resilience, love, and dignity. I thought back to all the grandmas who lived quietly, whose voices were dismissed, whose sacrifices went unnoticed. To them, I offer this message: your worth is never measured by recognition alone. Your strength lies in your patience, your love, and the integrity with which you live your life. One day, those who doubted you will see the truth. One day, the silent heart will prevail. Never the real measure of happiness or strength. Recognition and respect, earned through life's trials, were far more precious. David struggled to adapt to the reality, but he slowly began to change. He approached me with humility, asking questions, listening to stories of the past he had never cared to hear. He began to understand, painfully but surely, that life was about more than entitlement. And in those moments, I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because forgiveness frees the one who gives it. I returned to my small routines, tending the garden, knitting in my chair, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Life had its rhythm again, but now it carried a deeper meaning. I realized that silence, patience, and endurance could wield more power than anger and confrontation ever could. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer across the skyline. I whispered a quiet thank you, not for the wealth, but for the acknowledgement, for the lesson, and for the journey that had led me here. My life, once filled with quiet struggles, had become a testament to resilience, love, and dignity. I thought back to all the grandmas who lived quietly, whose voices were dismissed, whose sacrifices went unnoticed. To them, I offer this message: your worth is never measured by recognition alone. Your strength lies in your patience, your love, and the integrity with which you live your life. One day, those who doubted you will see the truth. One day, the silent heart will prevail. As weeks turned into months, life settled into a harmonious rhythm. David and I began to rebuild our relationship, slowly but sincerely. He no longer viewed me as an obstacle, but as a person of strength and wisdom. My younger children remained close, cherishing the lessons learned and the love that had always guided us. The estate, while large and impressive, became secondary to the bond we nurtured. We traveled together, celebrated birthdays with joy rather than tension, and shared moments that had once seemed impossible. I watched my grandchildren grow, knowing that the foundation of patience, love, and integrity I had laid would guide them as it had guided me. One evening, as I sat knitting by the fire, David approached with a cup of tea. "Mom," he said softly, "thank you for everything. For teaching me, for guiding me, for showing me what truly matters." I smiled, my eyes reflecting the warmth of the firelight. "David, the lessons are yours to carry now. Live them, share them, and never forget that love, patience, and integrity will always outshine greed and entitlement." And so, life continued, not without challenges, but with a deeper understanding, a renewed respect, and a family bonded not just by blood, but by recognition of what truly mattered. I realized then that the true inheritance was never the money. It was the lesson, the love, and the enduring strength that had carried me through decades of being unseen. And in that inheritance, I found peace, pride, and a quiet joy that no fortune could ever buy. To all the silent grandmas, to all those who have been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated, your strength is unseen, but it is mighty. Your love is immeasurable. Your patience is unmatched. And when the time comes, the world, or at least your family, will recognize the value you have always held. And when they do, it will change everything. Life is not measured by wealth, nor by recognition alone. It is measured by love given, patience held, and the integrity with which one lives. And in the end, that is the greatest inheritance of all.